And welcome everybody. This is Gretchen from Alive, and I am happy to help present this month's Alive Academy. And I will turn it over to our host for today, Angela Williamson. Go ahead, Angela.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen, and thanks for joining us on this wonderful day, regardless of where you're at. I know the weather can be variable wherever you are, but thank you so much for coming and joining us and learning more about how to be a better person, how to be a better leader, how to be a better leader of our volunteers. So thank you for that. I'm really excited about this talk. I'm really excited about Heather, and I've been stalking her a little bit on LinkedIn, and I suggest that you also try to do the same thing. And after this, friend her. It'll be a great connection. But we're really excited to have you here as part of the Alive Academy webinar for 2021. And we're just really happy again to have Heather here and talking about empathy and experimentation and being able to be alive in today's world. And just a little bit of the agenda today. We are going to be going over, if I can find my PowerPoint, there we are. We're going to be going over some introductions. We'll, of course, have the presentation by Heather. We'll be doing questions and answers after. So I highly encourage you to put those into the chat and say hello, where are you from? And encourage you to, again, put questions as we go along. Heather will look at those later in the presentation. She has a pretty tight time frame for her presentation to stay on track. So we'll keep moving in that direction. If you're having any issues with your audio visual, you can certainly take the picture off. That sometimes helps. You can dial in with a phone and you try those different methods. You can also chat box into to Gretchen. Just type in, click on Gretchen's name, and she'll be able to help sort that out and help you with that. So again, introduce yourselves in there in the chat box. So I'd love to introduce Heather, and she's a social entrepreneur passionate about fostering communities focused on assets, abilities, and abundance. And she started in the not-for-profit world and saw that there were so many things that could be done better. How can we do this better? And she has been working on how to figure that out. So she has the PAUSE method, P-A-U-S-E, is a proprietary framework that helps change makers address difficult challenges and pursue promising opportunities. In today's world of the pandemic, I think this is really needed. So welcome, and we're really happy to have Heather. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Heather. Take it away, and I will unshare my screen.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be with all of you. And I'll start to share my screen so you can see what I have to show you. Can you all see that? You see this?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. I'm so glad to be here. And this was all made possible. I was telling Angela and Gretchen this story. I live in Tucson, Arizona. So I was at the Southern Arizona Volunteer Management Association breakfast, and I happened to sit right next to Dana Litwin, and Dana was the speaker for the event. And I just sat down and just started being friendly and saying good morning and introducing myself to others. And I said, who are you? And she said, I'm the speaker for today. And I just thought, wow, what a jackpot. That's awesome. And we just hit it off, and we've kept in touch. And then she introduced me to Paula Allen, and it just kept going. So I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And I truly appreciate all you do to make the world a better place. So I am Heather Hiscox. I'm the founder and CEO of Pause for Change. And as Angela said, I have been messing around with learning and trying to make things better for the last decade. So I'm going to share my knowledge that I have to date. Please know that if I give this webinar another year, we have new stuff in there. So Pause for Change and the way that I work is all about changing the way we change the world. What can we do differently? And it's about addressing challenges and pursuing opportunities in less time, using fewer resources to achieve greater impact. We do so much with the best of intentions, but we create so much unintentional waste. So I'll talk about what that looks like in real life. And I want to pause to thank you for pausing, because I have been in your shoes. I have had so many hats within the sector, And I know how busy everything is and what you're juggling personally and professionally and with the pandemic and all of the uncertainty we're in. So I really appreciate you taking a moment to do this and to learn with me. So today we're going to talk about really how this work is centered in empathy, equity, and experimentation. You're going to practice the actual pause skills. I don't really like theoretical, so I'm going to send you into small breakout rooms with another person. So you'll be working in pairs, where I'm going to give you 3 different activities you're going to use to think through a challenge or opportunity you have within your own organization, within your work. So you can immediately start to apply the skills and see how you can use them on a day-to-day basis. And then I'll infuse some different examples, and we'll talk about questions you have related to volunteer management. So I'm just going to hop right in and talk about the habit loop. So the habit loop is the way that we address challenges in our organizations. And usually this is nothing that is written down. It's not like our mission and value statements. We don't say, this is the way we problem solve, and that we're going to have a step-by-step way, right? We all just have our own personal habits. And as organizations, we have an organizational habit of how we address problems. So there's usually a cue or a trigger that says, okay, I got to go to action. Let's take an action. And then we get that reward. And usually that reward is certainty or a decision or a path forward. And that's just the normal way that we create change. But what I have seen in my work is that there are status quo problem solving skills that don't really serve us the best ways possible. So reliance on good intentions of what we think should work, like it makes logical sense, but how is it informed? We'll talk about that. Designing a solution in bubble or in silos. A lot of decisions are made at the board level or executive leadership team. And we know that sometimes those folks are least connected to some of the boots on the ground work, unfortunately. So we need to have different decision-making methods. Copying best practices. I'll probably infuse some additional stories, but where the think you should work and the best practices, about half of the solutions that organizations bring me in and they say, here's what we're thinking, here's their idea, they make perfect sense. If I look at their logic model, it flows beautifully, like step 1 to step 2 to step 3. It makes perfect sense. They are not crazy. Anyone would believe it. And half of those solutions do not work. And so there's a lot of learning and assumptions that we're going to talk about. And best practices are part of that. If you're copying a best practice from another community or another part of the sector or another whole sector, you really have to test it in your community first. We'll talk about that with experimentation. And then this whole waiting that we do and our love of pilots. We'll create a pilot and we'll wait 6 months to a year. Oh, I get it, again, logical, but most of my teams will have really clear answers in 4 to 6 hours of what should work. And I've had ideas completely destroyed within 4 hours. So you can do this work in hours, weeks, and months, mostly hours and weeks. So you don't have to wait to get those answers. So that's what these skills are going to teach you how to do. So everything we do right now, especially now, I had this slide before COVID-19. So much uncertainty, right? It's just coming at us from all sides. And normally this is what the accepted way of reaction, that action phase is. We see a problem, we make a plan, take action, get results. Even ideas themselves are useless, like execution, go, go, go. And in the urgency of the sector and the way that we work, this is just normal practice. I say, no, let's not do that. And this is what it looks like in our organization. So there's an opinion, there's an idea that's formed, that top triangle of waste. There's someone that makes a recommendation. We joke that it's usually the highest paid person in the room, the hippo. Decisions are made, there's planning, design, you build, and at the very end, you do this grand reveal to your stakeholders. You do this ta-da moment. That is highly risky, and you can see very resource intensive, but that's how we normally create programs. We design our services in the sector. We think we have it all figured out. We get it all pretty. And then we say, here you go. And then the stakeholder can say, are you talking to me? Oh, I don't want that. Or they could say, well, this is actually a more important issue to me. Maybe I'll get to that later. So it impacts the way that your solution can actually help people. So we're going to talk about the bottom part of this slide, the lower triangles of waste. And what we do is we start with stakeholders first. We don't wait till a grand reveal to try to create value. We talk to them first to understand their needs, wants, fears, challenges, all of those things. And then we do co-design solutions with our stakeholders. And we continually test and iterate so we can have little pause points where we can say, ooh, this is not the way. We need to pivot and do something else. Or we can pause and celebrate that learning and say, ooh, we have good validation. Let's keep going. Let's test the next assumption. So we're going to talk through what this looks like in real life. And I want to acknowledge that learning is not a straight line, right? Learning is a squiggle. It's a mess. And we joke, do you want to hit the hot mess early or do you want to hit it later? Because you're going to hit it at some point. We've all created programs that did not work. Me personally, I have created many before I knew better. So if these skills can really help you work through those squiggles most efficiently and effectively. And it's that whole, kind of a joke, but the idea of insanity that's attributed to Einstein. It's actually, I've read that many people have said this, but the same thing over and over, we're going to keep getting the same results. And as a sector, and I know in my work, I've been really frustrated with the results that I've been able to accomplish with the old ways. So that's what we're going to talk about. The pause skills are all about interrupting the action. So you're always going to have cues and triggers that are going to say, oh, something's wrong, or what's possible, let's go. We can choose a new way to react. And the pause skills are rooted in empathy, equity, and experimentation. How do we connect to others to understand their perspectives? How do we give access to power and voice and input? And then how do we test before we build? And so we're going to work through the first 3 of the skills, and then the next 2 have to come later, and I'll talk about how that happens. But the first is get aligned with our challenge. We're going to talk about what we don't know right away, so we're not wandering in the dark. We're going to understand our stakeholders and know who they are. We're going to test solutions, and we're going to make decisions based on evidence, not based on the HIPPO or best practices or what we think should work. We're going to know what's going to work with early data. And this is a different way of working. It requires vulnerability, and I want to fully recognize that. But vulnerability is where it's at, right? If any of you are Brene fans, that is the birthplace of creativity and change. But the struggle is real, and you have different reactions, right? Some people are like, woo, let me work differently. Amazing. I can't wait. Other people are terrified, right? And others will just like suspend all of their fear and go along with the program until they can make a full judgment. So you have a variety of responses in yourself and in your teams if you start to employ these tactics. And how people feel and respond matters. I'll just touch on a couple of these. You are pausing in the context of your current culture, that current loop and pathway that you solve problems and pursue opportunities. Trauma within our organizations is real. Part of COVID, I think one of the blessings that's come out of it is people are having conversations about trauma-informed work. And we are not out of that. Working in this sector, we carry trauma of the work that we do and the things that have happened within our agencies. And we are exhausted, right? We have this compassion fatigue. And as much as we want to change the world and we love other people and we just treasure our volunteers, we're exhausted. And we have to acknowledge that that impacts how we show up. And then there's an interesting organizational psychology diagnosis, I put that in big air quotes, that was emerging even pre-pandemic. This is a slide that was pre-COVID, that, we have these feelings in our organizations of doing more with less, distractibility, inner frenzy, and patience. We're pretty cranky with each other, even pre-pandemic, and it impacts how cranky we are with our stakeholders, including our beloved volunteers. So this is just a slide to acknowledge and to give you space to admit that this work is hard and that taking these changes, especially rooted in empathy, can help you reconnect to all of the different layers of this work and affect how you show up. So we want to make sure that you and teams are working in the learning zone. You have high psychological safety, high accountability. I encourage you to check out the work of Amy Edmondson, the Fearless Organization. There's really cool assessments you can do through their work. It's really important that organizations do not slip into apathy of this low feeling of safety and low accountability. We want to make sure that as a culture, you start to move in new ways, and this can start getting you there. So I want to introduce the flow of how we are going to proceed today. So you're going to have times when I'm sharing content, and then I'm going to give you kind of your not homework because you're doing it right then, but I'm going to introduce the activity, tell you the instructions, what I want you to do. And so I'll give you just a moment to get your handout. I have a slide for that, but you're going to use your handout or even a scrap piece of paper. It doesn't have to be the PDF that's being shared. You can just grab anything on your workspace. And we're going to have you work through the activities on your own. I'll play some nice thinking music in the background, and then I'll bring you back, and you'll go to breakout rooms, and you'll be with that partner for each of the activities. So you have that continuity of conversation. And you have about 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes with the transitions to talk about how you answer the questions, start to get feedback from your partner. And then we'll come back and I'll ask you in the chat to put any questions, insights, anything that's popping up for you. I loved the interactivity, and I know your colleagues would really appreciate to hear some of your takeaways from each of the activities. And then questions I'll hold till the end to see where we are with everything, to make sure we're on point. And so I'll give you just a couple minutes. If you don't already have the worksheet, go ahead and print that. Have a blank sheet of paper, something with you. So I'll give you a couple minutes, and I'll turn on the thinking music so you can see what we're going to be listening to while you do the work, and you can go ahead and get that. Let me know in the chat when you're ready. Oh, okay. Awesome. I think I got a lot of readies in the chat. Thanks so much for being responsive. I love an active chat, so please communicate. I know some people can't do two things at once, and sometimes I can't read them right away, but I love an active chat. As much as you can share, I really appreciate. All right, so you have your worksheet. I'm going to set up the why behind our first activity and then get you started. So package a challenge is the first of the pause skills, and this came to be because when I started working with teams early days, 8 years ago, I used to assume that all the teams were aligned around the challenge. Like they all understood why it happened, who said this was a challenge or an opportunity, why they were there, why they were chosen. And I quickly recognized that that is not true. Many people will be on a committee or a team and be like, why am I here? Who are these other people? What are we working on? So it's really just pausing to take a moment to focus on that. And these are some motivating questions that I want you to think about that can help you reframe your work. Is what if we created value for each other? We often don't look at our colleagues and our stakeholders in terms of what problem do I solve for you? Like we think about that with our donors and with some of our funding partners and our collaborative partners, but we don't spend enough time really thinking about how do I make the work of my colleague harder or easier, and how do they make my work harder or easier, right? And what if we learn together? There's so much siloing and separation where a whole division of your organization is having really great learning, but it never will reach you. And your learning will never reach them. That's a serious issue that you need to work hard as an organization to think about. How are we sharing learning? And how are we sharing power? Like I talked about with decision-making and other of these large big initiatives coming out of your board members and executive leadership teams, we really need to think about who has access to power, who has the voice, who can really share input. And we'll talk about how you can train up with evidence at the very end. And I encourage you to, with teams, an activity that I do, we don't have time to do today, but I encourage you to do is think about your positionality. So it is in fact 100% true, and it's hard to imagine, but how you see the world is only how you see the world. It is impacted by your gender, how you grew up, where you live, your race, ethnicity, your professional experience, that completely shapes how you see the world. And on a team, you're going to see things differently. And we just have to acknowledge and put value behind that. And when we have a team, we don't want to just work on our own. We want to pull in people across the organization, right? We want to say, who needs to be a part of this? Who has expertise? Who has experience? Who has unique perspectives? And I say, like, on one team, give me the troublemaker, give me the person that is like always asking, why do we do this? How about this? What about this? And give me the person that's like, this is the way we've always done it. You can't mess with that. It can't be changed. I love those people joined together on a team, because when they use these skills, some of those thoughts fall away because learning emerges and they get to learn together. So you want to think about beyond you and beyond maybe even your volunteer team, who else needs to be part of helping you think through your challenge and stakeholder. So that's the first set to think about. And once we form our teams, we want to consider, how are we, what if we were aligned? What if we had clarity? And what if we were informed? So what if everyone knew whose idea it was that this was a challenge? What if everyone knew what had been tried before and the expertise that everyone on the team brought and offered to the team? We just want to take time to think about that and to feel connected before we do the work. And why that's important is with that giant triangle of waste, that top of that image, is we go into the execution mode. And that's really most appropriate when we're working on something that's highly known. And we can measure performance. We can hold our team members accountable. But when we're in search, when there's something murky, like I worked with a team, how do we create an affordable childcare program that's workplace based? That did not exist in their community. That was high search. No one was to be held accountable for anything other than learning at that moment, because we did not know the answer. There was no ROI to promise. There was no budget that could be created. There was no grant that should have been written. Everything was unknown. So we have to acknowledge when we're making a small tweak and we're just executing a little differently, and it's highly known, and when we do not know what the answer is, and we need to really give space for learning. It's really important for teams to have that freedom. So I'm going to set you up for your first activity. I want you to think about, and it's on your handout, what is a challenge? And I put challenge just as a placeholder, but it can be something painful and like, oh, this is not working for us. Our communication's not functioning. Oh, people aren't engaging. It can be something negative, or it can be something promising, like an opportunity of, what if we were to create X, Y, or Z? What if we really pursued this other cool thing that we could create to serve our stakeholders? So it can be, how do we fix it? And what's cool and what can we do? And once you pick one of those things, put that under the challenge, right? That's what you're going to focus on. And then what you're going to do is start to list all the stakeholders impacted. We forget about all the ways that our work touches other people internally and externally. And I like to even have people go a step further if you have time in your 2 minutes of thinking time. What would they say about it in their own words? It's something to hypothesize as we get ready for empathy work. So your turn, and what you're going to do is you're going to think about a challenge that you're working on or need to work on, or something promising. Who's involved and impacted? Think of internal and external. Choose one to focus on. So put a big circle around that group, or put a big star. And usually I say, pick the group that you think is having the greatest need, or feeling the most pain or frustration, or like the opportunity is greatest. You can't serve everyone at once, and you can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. They rarely work. So we're going to focus on one person at a time, and then think about how they would talk about the challenge if you have a moment. So let me pull up the thinking music. You'll have about 2 minutes. And then we're going to break out after that. So I'm going to come off of the screen, and you have it on the worksheet, just so I can get those breakout rooms prepared and ready. So go ahead and get started. right. I hope you had a chance to think about challenge and stakeholders. And it's so great to see Karina here. Karina's a pro. She's already been through this in another iteration. So happy to see you, Karina. And she's so great at sharing. Just a couple community care items I like to talk about when I send folks to breakout rooms. When you arrive, please introduce yourself. I'm always learning. Yes, you are, Karina. I love it. I'm going to send you to breakout rooms. When you arrive, say hello, greet your partner. Hopefully you don't know them. I always love introducing folks to each other, but if you know someone, have a wonderful reunion and share space. So you're going to have 5 minutes to say hello and talk to each other. And I want you to share space, acknowledging that, if you're 2 minutes in, it's about time for you to wrap up. And I'm just going to double check my timing. Yeah. And make sure they have time to answer the question and give them space. And then you'll get a little 30-second warning that it will let you know. And I'll send you a little love note about halfway through in the breakout room, just letting you know you're about halfway, to give you a little trigger if you need to switch to the other person. So I have them open. I have one room that does have 3 individuals. So I know that you all will be super savvy and awesome in sharing time with the 3 of you. And I will see you in just a couple minutes. And what you're going to do in the breakout is just to share what you wrote down. Okay. Oh, Rebecca has to take a work call. So maybe, oh, that's perfect, Rebecca. So you'll be in a group of 3, which will just be Marsha and Naomi. So we'll see you in just a couple minutes, and go ahead and share what you wrote down, and we'll see you.
Thanks, Heather. I am here, but I know between 3 and 3:30, I'm going to have to step away for a couple of minutes. So I didn't want to get in the middle of something and then have to go, bye.
Oh yeah, totally fine. Oh, Karina's by herself. Let me move Karina to room 2. Okay, I don't want to be her by herself. Maybe she couldn't join. Okay, all right. Looks like everybody else is settled.
All right, good deal.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm looking at my trusty agenda.
I know. I love how you have all the minutes blocked out. That is just, it's priceless, really.
Yeah, that's the way I have to do it. Otherwise, the train can easily slide off the rails, and you're like, oh, we have so much to cover.
I know. And then you're like, oh no, I've only got 10 minutes left for 20 minutes worth of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're still recording right now because it records always the main session. I don't know if you all do
breakouts.
Editing. Do you want me to pause the recording during this time when we come back, or do you trim this part out, or we just say hello to everyone?
I think we'll just say hello to everyone. We can pause it now. I'll pause it.
The triangle of waste has a lot of hubris and a lot of self-belief that we have it figured out when we know things can go sideways, because we're working with complex systems, complex problems, people who are super complex, right? And what if success was reframed and saving time, money, and energy, not building solutions? We are so rewarded to create and to build, and it feels so good. Making a decision literally releases juicy chemicals in our brain. We hate uncertainty. Like, we absolutely abhor it as humans. We love choosing a path forward because it feels so good. But what if we honored and celebrated, like, oh, that wasn't it. Oh, look how nice that we caught that fast and early. Sweet. We just saved all that time and energy. Let's move on to building something that's super impactful. Like, what if we thought about it that way? And this is just a funny way to represent, like, there's so much we don't even know we don't know. So after you identify what you don't know, there's still going to be stuff that emerges, because that's just how life works. The green slice is what we actually know, and the pink is what we can identify. And there's all the other stuff that people joke, it's like a little Pac-Man that's going to come get us. But we can learn. We can go learn this stuff. And we have to acknowledge that because of our positionality, how we see the world being our way, we have bias, right? And it's our job to help support our colleagues and our stakeholders to understand that how they see the world is how they see the world. So doing this activity of identifying unknowns is really helpful to get everyone on the same playing field. And this, I hope you've seen the ladder of inference. If you haven't, you can definitely Google it and learn more. But we are so programmed as humans, and this action takes just a snap of a finger. Like, it's so quick in our brains, where we observe data, we select the parts that we like best, that reinforce the beliefs we already have, and then we take action based on our beliefs. So, once we select our data, we add our own meaning based on our positionality. We make all those wonderful assumptions, we make conclusions, and we have our beliefs, and let's take action now. All of us have all these different ladders, right? And then we look for the beliefs that reinforce what we know to be true, because that's what we've experienced. So it just gets tricky when we're all walking around with these giant ladders of bias and uncertainty. So I'm going to have you go one step deeper around your challenge and stakeholder and start to think about these questions. So when you look at that challenge or opportunity, what do we know about this from our organizational perspective? Like, how do we know it's a challenge? Like, if someone said, prove to me that this is a challenge, like, what would you have to say to them? What data do you have? Or like, what anecdotal evidence or qualitative data also as well do you have? What's the background? How long has this been a challenge? Or why is this maybe the right time for this opportunity? What have you tried already? Maybe what's worked and what hasn't. Those are just some prompts to get you thinking about how to go deeper of identifying what you know and what you don't know around just your challenge alone. And then if you think about that one stakeholder that you circled for now, think about, how does the stakeholder talk about it in their own words? What do they want? What do you imagine that they want? What outcome would they desire related to the challenge? What obstacles are standing in their way? And how are they currently solving the problem? Do we know what they're already trying? Do we know what their experience has been like? So those are just some other provocations that you can think about when we do the next activity. So your turn is going to, and I'll put those questions back up. You're going to document what you know for sure and what you still need to learn about your challenge and stakeholder. And then try to prioritize the top 3. Let's say you come up with 6 or 7. Maybe put a little star, put circles or happy face, something around the greatest unknowns, the ones that you think are the most significant, because we want to prioritize our time. And I'll talk about that for the next activity. And then for your stakeholder, what are the top 3 unknowns for your stakeholder? So this is on your handout, but I'm going to reiterate one more time, and I'll talk through these again. You should have these prompts, and then I'll stop sharing my screen to send you back to breakout rooms. But yeah, what do we know from our perspective? What are the symptoms? What's the background? What's been tried? What's not? And then what would our stakeholder, what do they want and what's in their way? That's what we want to focus on for the next piece. So you're going to go to your breakout rooms now. I'm going to stop sharing. I'll put that nice music on and get you transitioned over there. Let me do that. It's always fun to juggle these. Okay, I'm going to open the rooms, and you, again, will have about 5 minutes to talk to your partner, and I'll send you a note. Okay, bye. Oh, actually. Hi. Hold on one second, Gretchen. Hold on. Okay.
Oops.
I'm bringing you all back. I got too excited for you all to be together, and I sent you to the breakout without your work time. I got so excited. Here I am blushing. I'm sure I've turned into a nice tomato shade. I am going to put on the thinking music, and we are going to take it back, rerun. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do your work, and then I'll send you to your wonderful partner. Okay, here we go. Keep going, keep going. Keep working. Okay. All right. And thank you, Julie, for asking me to put the slide back up. I hope you can see that. It was so great to see you all on video with your heads down. I know you, again, probably wish you had more time. Angela asked a quick question that I can address before we go to our breakout rooms for real this time. My premature sending you off into the internet. So sorry about that again. How long does this take to go through the process? And also situations are different. This is just a little taste. When I do work with organizations, we do 2 full days, 2 8-hour days, either virtually or in person. And we've had the same success virtually using the process doing Zoom. And teams spend the 2 full days having a couple of hours to, actually go out and talk to stakeholders, to do more deep team building around equity work. That's something that I infuse into that work more. And after they have the 2 days, it's 12 weeks of weekly coaching to support them. That's like the standard setup. And over that 12 weeks, you can just imagine that winding learning journey that they have. But that's the standard setup. And then from there, there's other fun stuff that organizations do. So I can definitely share more about that. Okay, so I'm going to send you now officially to your partner again, same person. Go ahead and share what you wrote down as your 3 top unknowns for your challenge and for your stakeholder, and then I'll bring you back. So here we go. Hello, welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you had a great conversation. And let's see, is Rose back? Can you see my slides? First of all, can you see the insight slide?
Yes.
Okay,
And
great.
I am back. Yep.
Okay, great. We moved you because I think your partner went to go take a call. So thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem.
Okay, so go ahead and remute yourself now that we're back, but in the chat, please list those insights. Some of the challenges you all were talking about are getting volunteers to report on their work and hours, so the scope of their impact. Marsha and Naomi are in similar industries that were ravaged by COVID. Now the variant, yes, the variant is very real. And there's other work calls that please put any takeaways that were around your areas of unknown. So what was that experience like? Identifying what you didn't know, it's usually very interesting for folks. Or what were some cool things that emerged from your conversation with your partner? Those are always really interesting to see and to hear from, and everyone to share. And what I like to think about with equity around team building is, and Gretchen and I were just talking about this while you were in the breakout rooms, it really gives everyone access to that power and to have a voice. And we often use virtual sticky notes or actual sticky notes. So even those folks that are more quiet or introverted get to have their say. They get to have their ideas documented. They get to be equally powerful and represented with everyone else's ideas. So it really, when people work as a team, they work as a unified group for learning. That is their number one reason they're there, is to learn. So people can be a timekeeper and a note taker and in this, like they take on totally different roles in that learning setup than they do in the organization. And not acknowledging, like if they're a director or something, they still have power, but it really changes. Everyone gets to say, I don't know. Even the director, even the CEO gets to say, I don't know the answer. Let's go find it. And it's very exhilarating. It's very energizing to give everyone that power. And then all learning is equal and important. And so it starts to reframe that equity conversation of who has access to power, who has voice. And so when teams are formed, I love to have a CEO and a frontline staff person on the same team, because the CEO is always blown away by the brilliance and the insights of that frontline staff member. And the frontline staff member gets to see the CEO is like a normal human that also doesn't know everything. And so it's really beautiful to have everyone mixed up. And that's really, I see the equity rooted in identifying your positionality and your bias and working together equitably and having that equal access. I see some of the communications that are saying, increase patience dealing with uncertainty, think about what staff doesn't know, how to find that, work on my thing and be critical of. Okay, we'll talk about, follow what you said. I love that. Okay, I'm going to get to some of those comments that you put. I'm going to keep going so you can do the next activity, and then we'll circle back to some of those comments, which I think are really important. All right, so the next piece, the U, is all about empathy, and it's understanding our stakeholders. There's so many assumptions we make because we just don't know what people are really thinking. So what if we could experience another person's perspective and really understand the why behind the actions that people do and do not take? What if we knew what people really did, not just what they said? I really focus on actions, not people saying, well, I think this, or I would do this. Like, no, what do they actually do? Because that's how people show you how they feel about something, whether or not they're willing to engage in your potential solution. So the act of talking to a person and asking them about their perspective is an intervention and game changing in and of itself. I obviously want you to pursue a potential solution that might come out of that, but that human connection alone is so powerful, and we forget that. So I love when teams, when there's deep siloing in an organization, when someone will jump over the wall and say, hey, hi, other division, hi, other colleague, how are we making your life more difficult in your space? Or how do you interact with this challenge? And what are your perspectives? It just creates a new bond and a new potential. Same thing when you're talking to your volunteers or other partners and stakeholders. It just opens up that you see them as an expert and as a valuable person. Your questions are shaped by your unknowns, which we're going to talk about next. We love open-ended questions. They help you get to why. If you ask yes or no questions, you have to follow up with why or why not. There's no empathy shortcuts. People hate it when I say this, but I do not really love focus groups or surveys. We love them for their expedience, but if someone says 46% of people are somewhat satisfied, like, what does it do? Like, what am I supposed to do with that sentence? Like, it's super murky and confusing. But if it gives us a signal of where we need to go learn more, then we can try to go talk to people and understand what satisfaction means to them. We can go more deeply. And focus groups get a little bit murky with groupthink and a lot of extroversion, like overabundance. And so it's good to really have these one-on-one conversations. And listening is very important, no interrupting, no problem solving, because we would need to be aware of our filter, that we're going to be listening differently with folks. And the other thing that we love to do when we do interviews typically is we love people to predict the future. If I created this, would you engage? If we had this event, would you attend? If, yes or no. And people always say yes because they're so kind, but it's not always reality. It's not true. I've had people promise me a lot of cool things and most of it doesn't materialize. So we want to focus on action. And what you do is you ask people what they have done in the past. When you ran into this barrier, what did you do in the past to address it? That is the goal, because it tells you what the problem was to be solved and what they tried and what worked and what didn't. So the difference in asking questions, I created this slide. I was actually training a group of journalists how to do better empathy interviews. And you would think journalists would have this figured out, and they do not. They're so used to asking those little short questions on the side. You know, how long have you been a partner? Would you renew? Who else do you talk to? Like, they just want like the facts. But we want to get to like the delicious emotion and the why behind it. So what has your experience been like? What's the best experience you've had? So you could say, what's the best experience you've had being a volunteer? What's the worst experience you've had? Can you give me an example of something that's been really valuable and another organization that you've enjoyed volunteering with or supporting? And so it's just asking more deep and in-depth questions to get people to really share their stories. So I want you, this is the last activity you're going to do, and then we're going to talk about experimentation. You're going to talk to your partner again. I want you to write 3 questions based on your greatest unknowns that you could ask your stakeholder to gain deeper understanding. And we're going to go to breakouts again after I give you your thinking time. So I'll give you the 2 minutes. I'm going to stop sharing, give you those 2 minutes to think about what you would say and put the music back on, what questions you would ask, and then you'll share those with your team member. Okay, here we go. Start the music again. right. I hope you had a moment to think about what questions you would ask. I moved, Joanna and Marie, you will be together now in a group. So kind of fast track each other, catch each other up, and I'm trying to fill in the blanks of folks that had to hop off. So I'm going to send you now to your breakout rooms, and you will have about the same amount of time to share those questions. And I want you to think about, are your questions open-ended? Do they help you get to why? And are they connected to your greatest unknowns? To make sure you evaluate your own questions and connect the dots. So here we go. Okay, welcome back. All right. Great to be back with y'all. Okay. Same kind of thing in the chat. I was rereading more of the comments, really good from before. In the chat, any sort of takeaways or insights, go ahead and remute yourself if you've rejoined. I would love to hear any feedback from writing the questions and thinking about asking the questions, and put those in the chat and I'll refer to those. This last slide is about asking questions. And these are some of the number one questions that I get is how many people do I have to talk to? Like, how does this work? So you're really trying to notice the emotion that came out when you were interviewing people. How are they really feeling about this challenge? What did you learn? What took you by surprise? When you talk to more people, did anything come up again and again? And then what new questions came up for you? And people think like, how many people do I have to talk to really get to the answer? And the answer to that is, they're really wishy-washy. It depends. But when you talk to enough people and you hear the same thing over and over and over, you're onto something. For example, an agency hired me to interview 75 of their members. It was a grant-making organization. I was interviewing 75 foundations. I could have stopped after foundation number 27. It was amazing how similar all the things they were saying over and over and over. And so we were able to carry that insight. So those are the things to think about. Just document what you're learning, what you're seeing. And what this looks like in real life is when you don't know the answer and you're working with a leader who hasn't talked to anyone, who wants to make these large scale changes, to say, why don't we talk to those people most impacted? Have you already done so? What insights have you gathered? And what I've seen is when individuals take their own initiative to talk to other people in the organization around a challenge they're trying to address and can present that learning, it works really well for them. Like, it looks great that you've taken that initiative and you wanted to break out of those silos and go around the hierarchies to really learn more. So we're going to talk about solution testing, what it looks like to test. So you've gotten rooted, you've understood how everyone feels about the challenge, everyone's aligned around it. You've identified what you don't know. You've gone out and you've talked to people about what they think to help you fill in those gaps of knowledge that you have. And then we start to identify solutions at that point. We don't start in the beginning because that's that giant triangle of waste. We start solution brainstorming after we've talked to folks. So what if we were inclusive in our brainstorming? That reinforces equity and access. Not just board members and executive leadership team should have access to brainstorming, right? I have met so many staff members that no one has ever asked, but they have a Word document of 100 ideas and they're just never tapped. And you might be in that role in your organization, like, no one ever asked me, but I have insights. I have things that I would recommend we need to change, and it could be different potentially. So with brainstorming, we want to think of abundance and we want to think about going bold. And with testing, that's how we get into actual solutions. So we want to think about, what if we actually solve the problem? So many times in the social sector, we say, okay, I have 5 minutes, $5 and 5 people. What can I build? Like, it's so scarcity focused. You don't come up with a lot of brilliant, amazing, bold ideas. So we want to write down all different ideas that bubble up. And there's no judgment. And the more ideas, the better. And it's not the time for practicality. I have worked with organizations where the idea they came up with, they were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like, we can never pull this off. But it turned out with some of their experimentation, they were able to develop a solution, that workplace-based childcare. They came up with a model that they thought was totally unrealistic, that at this point has angel investment and has been scaled to other workplaces. They thought it wasn't possible. So they started to limit themselves before they even got to test it. So don't do that. And once we prioritize a bunch of solutions, we're going to have a lot of ideas. Hopefully, we want people to really break free, but we want to prioritize those potential solutions. So we want to say, which of these would really help our stakeholder and would really wow them? Like, they would say, whoa, I've never seen this before. This is really cool. And so you want to prioritize. Think about a 2x2. If you were to write one idea per sticky note, or even on a virtual sticky note board, what would actually help and what would wow your stakeholder? Those are the potential solutions to focus on. We don't want to get into the meh, that wouldn't really solve my problem. Like, that's not exciting. We want to prioritize our efforts. And we want to think about assumptions that are embedded within these solutions that we might want to build. So what if we knew what would work before we built it? And what if we reduce our risk? How we problem solve right now is super risky. What if we knew what would work early and not, and we could jump ship and do something else? And we can be quick and scrappy. And I'll talk about what that looks like. So we want to try to actually break our solutions before we build them. This is antithetical to how we are all taught to build and how it feels so good with those chemicals in our brain. We're taught to build the giant triangle, make it perfect, and then do the reveal. But instead, we want to challenge our solution. We want to reinforce data and insights. We want to see what action people will take before we build this. We want to get to why and collect that evidence and share it with decision makers if we don't have the power, and we're preventing that waste. And so assumptions are built into every single potential solution that we have. We just don't pause to think about it. It's all the stuff we take for granted. Of course they want to do X, Y, and Z. I'll give you an example. I was working with an organization and they realized that they were treating all of their volunteers one size fits all. From the way that a court-ordered volunteer was being treated to someone that practically had a desk and worked there, volunteer 40 hours a week. And they thought we need to really segment our volunteers and give them different attention based on, what the role that they play in the organization, their level of commitment, their level of engagement moving forward. So what does that look like? And so they said, for those folks that are higher on that engagement scale, that are most deeply involved, how do we really create a valuable experience? So they wanted to give people these lanyards with all these colored pins to like fruits and vegetables. It was a food bank. And the people could gain a papaya and an avocado and a cucumber based on years of service and all of that. And so that was one idea. And they wanted to hold an appreciation gala event. So those were some of the potential solutions. But when they went to talk to volunteers and they found out what's most important to you and really understand these real veteran committed folks were really thinking about, they said, I don't want to wear a lanyard. Don't you dare spend a penny on any sort of swag or anything. Any extra money you have, put it back into the organization to serve more people. And they said, you know what I really want? I want to have a picnic. And I want to meet my co-volunteers in a relaxed setting where we're all not packing food boxes and busy. I want to meet their grandbabies that I hear about, that we talk about while we pack the food. I want to meet their children. I just want to be relaxed and flexible. And the other idea that they had was, what if we just had, they kept talking about these foot-long subs, just get a giant sub and we'll have the picnic, get a giant sub, and we'll have lunch with the CEO. We just want to have a one-on-one time to ask him any questions that we have. That's what we really want. And so they tested people's actions. So the next step for them was to run an experiment. If we host a barbecue, how many people will register and attend? And obviously for food and all that, they had to get RSVPs. So they're able to run that experiment. And if we invited people to a lunch with the CEO, how many people would show up? So it's important when we have these ideas, let's create a lanyard. What are the assumptions, right? People want to wear a lanyard. People want to work hard to earn. They're motivated by earning pins, that the pins will make a difference or signify commitment. Those are assumptions that we make when we come up with this stuff, and we have to test it. So it's all about what action the stakeholder must take. Because again, people might say, sure, yeah, but what are they willing to do? And that's where you take it to the next level. So people saying, I want to come to a barbecue, who actually shows up to the barbecue, who RSVPs? That's what I'm talking about with this assumption testing. Once we prioritize our assumptions of what must be true for this solution to really create value, again, we're going to have multiple. Some of my teams have 45 different assumptions they come up with. So we want to do a 2x2 again. Is this a really important assumption? And how much do we really know or not know? If it's highly uncertain, and it's very important, it's very critical. Let's say you want to do a volunteer app where people use an app on their phone to track their hours and do reporting, their time tracking. There's a lot of assumptions built into there. So which are the most important, right? Do they have access to a smartphone? Do they know how to download an app? And, would they start using it? The other ones of, do they want a monthly report or an annual report? That's one of those less important assumptions to get tackled in the very beginning. So we want to prioritize those. So we're not going to stop to do a full exercise, but I encourage you to think about, what activity are you working on right now? Not the challenge and all of that we already talked about, because that you haven't even talked to your stakeholders yet. You haven't done that early work to help you generate potential solution ideas. But think about something you're working on now, or that's on the radar, or like on the burner on the stove that people want you to start considering? What are assumptions that are built into that solution? Or think of a solution that you already have in place. What have you maybe not recognized that you assumed people would take action around, that you might need to do some extra testing? That's important to think about. And this is just a funny way to show what this looks like in real life. And this contributes to that 50% of people not doing what I think they're going to do and the solutions don't work. Is imagining of these 3 kiddie bowls, you have the food lined up, and this is what the cats do. Humans do this all the time with these amazing solutions that we think we have for them. So we want to test. And what we walk away with that testing is we have power of the data and insights. We have our observations, we have our why and our takeaways, and then we can share that learning with decision makers. And so we want to design an experiment. If we make some offer, people will demonstrate the behavior. So if we invite them to the barbecue, this number of people will attend. And so we get to see if our hypothesis is correct, and we get to see what's going to happen. I've worked with so many organizations that had software solutions that they thought they had to buy and roll out, and offering people triplicate form versus software, and people only chose the paper and never wanted to touch software, has saved some agencies $150,000. So some of these tests can be really quick and simple. And I'll share another example at the end. So what we do, that last skill, the E of pause, is we make decisions based on evidence. Learning is the metric of success, and we want to know why something worked or didn't. And we want to be able to train up to leaders with the evidence that we have. When we had our pre-call, we were talking about, how do you influence folks that are making these wide scale changes and they're not talking to staff? They're merging entire organizations and not talking to the 2 different teams to figure out what they need and want. And it's asking leaders questions of, it's leading edge practice to deploy equitable and empathetic practices. How many of our folks have you all interviewed to really understand their needs, wants, fears, and desires? Just asking questions, right? Offering that there's new ways to work that can lead you to new solutions can be really powerful, just to get your leaders thinking differently. So once you have your data, once you see what people are willing and not willing to do, you can make recommendations, whether you want to tweak something, pivot completely, or persevere. And so what those look like specifically is, if you run an experiment and you need to tweak it, right? Let's say you schedule the barbecue and it turns out to be, a conflict with an at-home college game that's really popular in your community. Like, ooh, maybe the barbecue is still a good idea, but oops, that was not a good Saturday because everyone was already tailgating. You might want to rerun it again. A pivot would be, no one RSVPs. They all talked about the barbecue, but no one wants to do it. We need to get to why and understand what's behind that and come up with a different potential solution on our list and work on that one. And persevere is like, wow, 85 of our volunteers signed up. That's awesome. And then the event's a great success. Okay, you start to want to test other assumptions built into your solutions to keep growing the evidence you need. So just to recap, we've talked about the power of empathy, understanding everyone's perspective, equity, everyone has access to have a voice and shared power, and testing. We don't just create these giant triangles. Once we have feedback and we've shared power with our stakeholders, we're co-designing, we're co-creating with them to come up with solutions about which solutions will work for them. And we do that through testing. So instead of relying on good intentions, building what we think should work, working in bubbles and not talking to each other, or copying best practices and waiting, in just a 15-minute interview, do 3 to 4 interviews. That alone can be game changing. Just identifying uncertainty and sharing it with your boss and saying, there's some stuff that we don't know, and they don't know either, or maybe they do, maybe they can help fill in gaps. That can be game changing. Oh, Angela said, repeat the quote, leading edge practice. Yeah, it's leading edge practice to center equitable practices and empathetic outreach and conversation. So have they engaged everyone to have feedback? Have they talked to people that are impacted most by the changes they want to make, or these ideas or activities they want to roll out? And what did they learn? So you can be like, what did you learn from that? And that's one of those interviewing questions of like, oh, we didn't do any of that. That's a problem. So these are the 5 pause skills that we have talked through. And I want to stop now to answer any questions that you have, and just reinforce that in status quo, right, we're managing, we're asking questions like, do I like this idea? When's it going to launch? You know, does it fit with what we're already doing? And making those assumptions of what will work and what won't work. Instead, we're trying to mentor through the change. We're on a learning journey. We want to put empathy in action. We really want to test strategies. So I'm going to stop there just so I can see all of your faces, and let's go to the chat. Any questions that you have, please put into the chat. And while you're doing that, I want to share another example. And I was working with an organization, and they had a volunteer program, and the volunteers were driving individuals that were released from the hospital after they were released after having procedures or were hospitalized for some sort of illness or problem. And volunteers were picking them up, driving them home, and were getting all of their things like their prescriptions, groceries, helping them with all the activities they would normally have with family members. So these were folks that lived alone and were really isolated. So they wanted to provide this volunteer program to help. And what was interesting, I think another layer I want to add for your thinking, is that we often don't think about, if we have a volunteer program that reaches across the city, not just within our organization, but our organization leverages this resource, that we need to understand what the perception is of our stakeholders and our partners of our program. Because this organization and the 2 coordinators that ran this part of the program were just not having success. And one of the things that we learned when we were doing interviews with their potential partners and with their existing partners was that there was a belief that their volunteers were all older, white, wealthy folks that only wanted to drive within like a mile or 2 of their house to help volunteer. That was the perception. And then another perception was they didn't have any people that were bilingual. And they're like, if you're going to provide resources across the whole city, we need to have multilingual volunteers that are willing to drive anywhere across the city. And those were both assumptions that the originating agency did not know that people even had of their volunteers or of their program. And it caused a lot of issues. So that's another thing that I would encourage you to consider. What is the perception of your volunteers in the community if you are partnering with other agencies or perhaps sharing resources? That was an example that really took me by surprise. So I would love to hear from all of you, just insights, questions, anything pop up. I'll stop yammering so I can let you think of it. You can post those in the chat.
Certainly add your questions in the chat. I know we're getting closer to time to the end, but I just wanted to pop this up there while you're thinking through your questions, upcoming events that are coming up through Alive, just so you have that, you screenshot it or go to the website. But what questions, any questions that have come up or comments about the presentation, what Heather's brought forward? I know one of the questions I have is, how do you, when you talked about jumping over into somebody else's silo, and how do you not get eaten up alive when you go over to the silo? Because I had an experience actually yesterday, kind of jumping into a little silo, and it was like, they just want to take. And so how do you work with that? And how do you work them into thinking about empathy beyond themselves?
Yes, that's a great question. It has to start with you, right? Someone has to make the first leap over to the other side, right? And so that alone, even if it maybe wasn't like the best experience or it may feel negative, like I said, the act alone of breaking free and saying, I'm going to go talk to this group, I'm going to get perspectives and feedback, that alone is an intervention that can change something. It starts to shift the dynamic where it opens up the conversation a bit. And it is not pure magic. Like right when you have those conversations, not like you all go, skipping through fields of flowers and everything's perfect, right? You have to keep building that relationship. But what is key is that when you're asking questions, there is zero interrupting. There is active listening and empathetic listening. So when a person's offering their answer, you're saying, okay, you know, what I hear you expressing, what I hear you saying is, and you're saying it back to them, right? All those best practices of listening. What I hear you saying is that correct? And they're like, yeah, good job. Like you're actually taking in what I'm sharing with you. And then you keep going and you keep doing that practice. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you for that feedback. This is what I'm taking away from that. This is what I'm hearing from you. And they're like, yes, it's very validating. And then you're not interrupting. And if you're not jumping in to try to solve anything. If they say, well, you were, you know, X months delayed and blah, 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 blah. You're like, oh, okay. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. You're not saying, no, we weren't. You're not engaging in a debate. You're just listening. And then you're synthesizing. And then you're talking to another person and another person and another person. And you're seeing how similar or different are these perspectives. Because again, everyone's holding onto their giant ladder. And they all have their idea of what's going on. And most of it we don't know, and we're too polite to share. But if given a really caring and thoughtful way of doing that outreach, you can get great insights. And from those, you can, after you talk to 5 or so people, you're going to get a sense of what's happening. And then it is up to them if they want to come over to your side and do those, you know, have those same conversations. I wanted to mention something that was in the chat. And I think that the person has jumped off, that if some things are explicitly wrong, but it doesn't make them easier to address. Sydney was saying, like, that's different. And that's where you can really use data and evidence to your advantage to say, okay, here's what I'm seeing. And I've never experienced this in any other organization. And I know this really isn't best practice overall. Like, is there a reason why we choose to do it this way? And you can use motivational interviewing techniques where you just kind of leave it to them. And they have to, you know, deduce those conclusions. Okay, Paula, you have a question. Go ahead.
So this is really fascinating. I ran into it recently. So I'm building a brand new volunteer program from scratch. I've been here 10 months. And I had a conversation with one of our centers. And I'm curious how you would frame the sort of the timeline of how long this takes and what the process is like, you know, from instant action to like, we have to test more, et cetera. So they were talking to me about how volunteers could get involved, what kinds of things they need or their clients, their patients need. And they said to me, oh, this is great that you've asked us. If you're the kind of person who's actually going to get things done, these are the things we need. And I was like, okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm writing these down. These are great ideas. It might take longer than you think to enact a solution where you have to build a volunteer program to address that need. But I'm curious, you know, what kind of things you might have said if like, oh, if you're actually going to get something done and this isn't just a listening session. We always have listening sessions and no one ever does anything.
Yeah. And I think my first response and thought is, how did they come up with this list of solutions? These ideas, like, were they generated by volunteers themselves? Were they generated by patients and patients' families and clinicians? And the thing that we do is we lump everybody into one pot and we try to do one size fits all for expedience. It never works. So when people are throwing out ideas, it's like, who did you talk to? So are these ideas that are for and by and with patients? Are these for, by, and with volunteers? Are these family members? If you throw all those ideas into one pot, it's like, how are you going to create value for everyone? Because what family members and patients and volunteers want are different.
Right.
And volunteers that have never had a family member served at that clinic, family members that have, like, it gets messy. That's why it looks like the image that I put on there. So that's the clarity. And then the next question is, you know, what support do you have for us to really dive more deeply into this, to figure out, you say, you know, the gala or lanyard, there's a lot built into that, right? And so it's like, how do we better investigate what specifically, why you think that's valuable? Because if you create a solution, you don't understand what problem it solves or how it creates value for someone, that's highly problematic. It just can't be nice to have or do. That's wasteful. It has to address a pain, a problem, or create delight for your stakeholder to really matter, to really see engagement. And that's the gold. It's not just to create for creation's sake and to listen to leaders and like execute what they think is cool. Like, you have to have better and different conversations to really create more value.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Other questions? I know we're right at 3:31. So if you need to go, we understand. But if you have another burning question, jump in.
And I'll put the website. I love talking to people about their specific stuff. Don't worry, I'm not gonna like attack you for any sort of sales opportunity, any of that. I know some people are afraid to reach out. No, like reach out to me seriously and tell me like specifically what is making you crazy, and we'll talk through it and we'll come up with some strategies. The other thing I'm going to put into the link, so pauseforchange.com is my website, and then Possibility Project, and it's so hard to see without my glasses. Oh, you're welcome, Julie. Possibilityproject.org is another project that I have where we have disruptive and important conversation across the sector. So if you want to check out that website, all of those talks that we have are free. They're 1 to 2 a month. Check out the website and see what else I'm doing to really shake up how we change the world. And yeah, reach out via email. It's just heather@pauseforchange.com. And on the website, there's a link where you can set up a call and just leave a note that you were here for the Alive webinar, and then we can find a time to chat and I can help you think through how you might strategize around your challenge.
Right, Heather, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I know during this time, we just all need the encouragement and refocus and rethinking, just kind of a fresh thought. I know this has definitely triggered a few questions like, oh, I need to stop for a second and really like rethink, like, who am I talking to? How am I talking with them? What questions am I asking? So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Look forward to more exciting things and now knowing you instead of stalking you on LinkedIn. And it'll be good. And so anyway, thank you everybody for coming. Definitely check out the Alive upcoming events and have a great day.
Hey, take care, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Heather.